Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Gift of Health Total Tuesday Wellness. And I'm so excited you guys are here. And I cannot be more excited for today's session. As you all know, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And cancer is something, when you hear the word, it literally cringes your heart, right? And if you're in Canada, cancer is the number one killer, with heart disease being number two, but it's so unfortunate. Like it is the number one cause of death in our country. And October being the Breast Cancer Awareness Month, I'm really excited for today's session because it's so important for us to be aware of breast cancer risk. Like, did you know, like literally like half of the breast cancers can be prevented, yet like when you look at it, only 1 out of 4 people know what to do when it comes to preventing breast cancer, or even what to do when it comes to breast cancer. So that's why, like, I'm so excited for today's session because I have my dear friend and a soul friend who is actually going to enlighten us during this session what actually we can do when it comes to breast cancer. So, allow me to introduce our beautiful guest today. So, today I have Dr. Simran Malhotra, and she is a triple board certified physician in internal medicine, hospice, and palliative care and lifestyle medicine. She's also certified health and culinary coach, and she is currently practicing part time as palliative care physician. She was also named as a top doctor in 2019, 2020, and 2023 by Baltimore Magazine in palliative medicine. And on a personal note, she's a mother of 2 and a BRCA1 previvor with a strong family history of breast and female reproductive cancer, and underwent a risk reducing bilateral mastectomy and total hysterectomy in 2020 at the age of 32. After her own experience as a patient and her professional experience in palliative care, she actually founded Wellness by LifestyleMD, a platform where she aims to educate people, particularly women at high risk of cancer like herself, on the powerful impact that positive lifestyle changes can have on this quality of life and even longevity. She has her own column on everyday health called Awaken Your Wellness. And she has been featured on several blogs, podcasts, where she has shared her unique perspective and experience from palliative care, as well as being a genetic mutation carrier passionate about using lifestyle as medicine. And it's a huge honor for me to welcome her to this show, and so excited. So before I bring in, please let us know if you guys are able to see us, because we just want to make sure. Okay, I see. So please give us a thumbs up if you're able to see us. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, guys, so without further ado, I'm so honored to welcome Dr. Simran Malhotra. Welcome, Simran.
Thanks,
And
Dr.
it's a huge
Sharma.
pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy to share on the topic that you and I are both so passionate about. And today, I think I'm going to surprise your listeners a little bit with a little twist on breast cancer risk reduction, and it'll be a fun time. It'll be a fun time. So let me go ahead and share my screen,
Sure.
and we'll get this party on the road.
Mm-hmm.
All right, just let me know if you can see it.
Yes, we are able to see your screen, Simran.
Okay, wonderful. So let's get started. If while we're, I'm going to introduce myself, and while we're talking, if you guys have any thoughts, if you guys have any questions, please just throw them in the chat, and we can make this more interactive. There is so much to say on this topic, but what I'm really passionate about, especially in the month of October, is not just spreading awareness about breast cancer, but really taking action against breast cancer. And so today we're going to talk about some lifestyle techniques, but also some mindset techniques that I have used personally in my life to help me reduce my risk of breast cancer. And so I hope you're going to take some of those things away today. And here we have some of the objectives for today. Like I said, I'm going to put a little bit of a twist on these things. So you're going to learn about the statistics of breast cancer and risk factors, and especially the role of genetics, because a lot of times we don't talk about genetics and genetic mutation. So you'll learn a little bit about that. Of course, lifestyle medicine. If you follow Dr. Shobha, you hear about this amazing tool and everything that's in the tool belt all the time. And then I'm going to share with you 4 actionable ways to actually go ahead and reduce your risk of breast cancer, or share with someone that you love to reduce their risk of breast cancer. Now, I'm also going to share with you some mindset tools that have helped me on my journey. So let's start with this. Why is there a palliative care doctor here to talk to me about breast cancer and lifestyle medicine? It never really makes sense to most people. But like Dr. Shobha mentioned, I am not a cancer doctor. I am not a breast expert by any means. However, I have been around a lot of cancer in not just my personal life, but also my professional life. And so what I'm going to share with you is very heartfelt today. And I hope that you use this knowledge to empower yourself, and even more so, take action. So for me, cancer and I first met when actually I was just 13 years old. So you see on the left side, that's my mom. She was diagnosed with breast cancer when she was 33. I was 13. And at that time, no one really questioned anything. And I'm South Asian, I'm Punjabi. And so, we don't like to talk about cancer. We don't like to talk about disease. We don't like to talk about death. And so my mom really got treated for cancer behind closed doors. She got chemo, she got radiation, she got surgery. We closed the door and we moved on with our lives. No one really asked any questions, at least until 2014. Now I was in my medical residency. I was doing internal medicine, and someone else in our family got diagnosed with a very aggressive form of ovarian cancer. And at that point, I was like, okay, this isn't making sense. Over the years, I had also heard stories about aunts and other people in my mom's family who had stomach problems and then passed away. And like, I started connecting all the dots, right? And so then I encouraged my mom to get genetic testing again. And she found out now this time in 2014 that she actually carried the BRCA1 genetic mutation. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means. But essentially, she went on to get a preventative total hysterectomy in 2014. And then, unfortunately, in 2017, the year my mom was actually celebrating her 15 years cancer-free from breast cancer, she was actually diagnosed with her second recurrence of breast cancer. So then she went on to get a bilateral mastectomy with a deep reconstruction, and she is thriving and doing well today. But to date, we have had at least 10 women on my mom's side of the family who have had either breast or ovarian cancer. And so a very, very strong penetrance. And so what ended up happening for me is later that year, I was actually engaged to get married. And so I thought it would be best for me to also get tested to see if I carry this genetic mutation that I had a 50-50 chance of inheriting from my mom. And it happened that I also found out that I was positive for the BRCA1 genetic mutation. And so what is this BRCA1? It's actually an oncoprotective gene, meaning we all are born with the BRCA1 and 2 genes. And they actually are supposed to protect us from getting certain cancers, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, prostate cancer, and a few others. But when you have a genetic mutation in these genes, that means they don't work properly. And so you have a higher risk of getting these cancers. And so for me, based on my family history, based on everything, the medical team told me that my lifetime risk of getting breast cancer was 87%. And my lifetime risk of getting ovarian cancer was 50 to 60%. So this was very difficult, as I will share with you, this was very difficult information to receive when I was just 26. And so the next several years were filled with doctor's appointments and very, very challenging decisions, which I will share with you in a moment. So who gets breast cancer? So these statistics are from the US, but again, probably very similar to Canada. Breast cancer is actually the most common cancer that's diagnosed in women after skin cancer, and it's a second leading cause of cancer death in women after lung cancer. While it's the most common cancer in women, it's also important to know that men can get breast cancer too. And actually, 1 out of every 100 breast cancers diagnosed in the United States is actually diagnosed in a man. And I think, especially this month, it's important to talk about that because a lot of times we just associate breast cancer with women. And so, it is really great that cure rates for breast cancer are improving. We have lots of treatment advances where we have earlier detection through really good screening. And so I'll put a plug in there. It's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. The average risk woman, the recommendation is for mammogram screening to start at age 40. And so if you are listening to this and that's you, it's important to go talk to your doctor about whether it's time to get a mammogram. If you're above the age of 40, then, make sure you schedule your annual screening mammograms. So for the average risk woman, this is a very busy slide, but for the average risk woman, 1 in 8 women in the United States will develop breast cancer, and it's about a 12% lifetime risk, meaning by the time she's 75, she'll have a 12% risk of getting breast cancer versus for me, right, 87% lifetime risk. So as a genetic mutation carrier, it is a radically increased risk compared to the average risk person. So what are some of the things we can't change, right, when it comes to our breast cancer risk? We can't change the fact that we're female, nor would we want to, right, Dr. Shobha, because being female is absolutely magnificent. And, when we age, that's also a risk factor. If we inherit a genetic mutation, like I mentioned, BRCA 1 and 2 are just one genetic mutation. There are several now that we know of that are associated with an increased risk of breast cancer, ovarian cancer, and others. But BRCA 1 and 2 are the most common inherited mutations. If we've had a history of breast cancer before, that's a risk factor we can't change. History of radiation, for example, if you were treated for lymphoma or something like that. Increased breast density, that's an important one to talk about because especially in young women, we typically tend to have more dense breasts, which makes screening, especially with mammograms, a little bit more difficult. And there was actually some recent news that I was watching saying that if you are found to have increased breast density, you can talk to your medical team about even more specific screening tools like an MRI to see if maybe you would be a good candidate for that. And then there's, a few other non-modifiable risk factors. Sorry, my headphone just does not want to stay in. All right. So here are some red flags. I'm not going to go through every single one of these so that we can get through our whole talk, but these are the red flags that you want to think about when it comes to hereditary breast cancer. So if you're watching this, what I would do is I would take a picture of this slide, and then I would bring this back to your family and use this as a tool to really map out, like, are you someone that is at high risk of a hereditary genetic mutation, or is there a strong family history that actually runs in your family? And, I think it's important to recognize that, and I think I have this somewhere later in my presentation, that, only 5 to 10% of the population actually has an inherited genetic mutation. That's a very small percentage. So majority of the people will not have a genetic mutation, which is really great news because that means that, there is a lot that you can do to reduce your risk. And sorry, my phone is going off, so I'm going to mute it. So there was a statistic that actually Dr. Christy Funk, who is a breast surgeon, shared, and it was mind-blowing to me because what she said is about 85 to 87% of women that are diagnosed with breast cancer, don't have a single first-degree relative that has had breast cancer. So, this is important. So while it's important to know if you actually do have a family history, because that could be life-changing for you in terms of tools and screening and all the things you can do. It's also important to know that most women don't have a genetic mutation.
And
And
I'm so glad you brought this point, Simran, because this is so important, right? So only like 5 to 10% is genetic, because always we try to blame the genes, saying that, okay, so maybe I got this because it's genetic or it's running in my family. So, but it's so important, like almost like 80 to 85%, it's not because of that. And that's good news, because we can do something
yeah,
about it, right? Yes.
absolutely. And, we hear this all the time that, genes run in families. And what I always like to remind people is so do lifestyles, right? So it's not necessarily our genes that are causing disease, especially majority of the chronic illnesses that we're seeing today. It's actually the lifestyles that have been passed down through the generations. So it's a great point. So for me, then later that year, I went on to do a hospice and palliative care fellowship. And, a lot of people don't know what this is either, but I basically specialize in caring for people living with and dying from serious illness. As you can imagine, at 26, becoming the patient, navigating a lot of really challenging decisions, this was a very, very difficult time for me, especially because I was taking care of a lot of young people with cancer at the hospital that I was working at. And some of them even had the same genetic mutation as me. And so every time I would, I had a huge medical team, right? I had an oncologist, a genetic counselor, I had surgeons. I had a whole bunch of people. And every time, they would tell me about the latest medication and the preventative surgeries I needed to have, and the medications and the mammograms and the MRIs. And it was a lot of things that I had, on that they gave me on a plate to do and to think about. And the one question that kept coming up was, okay, this sounds amazing. And I appreciate all the science behind this. And I appreciate all of these things. And I will do them when it's time. But right now I'm 26. I'm about to get married. I haven't had my kids yet. I'm not ready to get a mastectomy or a hysterectomy. So what is in my control that I can do to reduce my risk like now, so that I can function as a doctor caring for dying people for a living? And it was crickets. It was absolute crickets from my medical team. And it wasn't until one day, and I think I shared this story many times with you, Dr. Shobha, is that there was a patient I was taking care of in hospice. She was a young woman in her 40s, dying from ovarian cancer, and had this same mutation. And a few days before she passed, found out I carried this mutation, and really just grabbed my hand and, said, Simran, don't let this happen to you. You have a choice. Be here for your future kids. And at that moment, I had no idea what that meant, but it lit something inside of me. And I had to figure out what it was. And that's what the next several years were all about for me. So 26, 5 really big things that I had to do over the next 7 years, right? I had to finish my medical training. I had to get married. Luckily, I had already found the man of my dreams. So that was a huge success for me at that point. Number 3, I needed to get pregnant. Number 4, I needed to have kids, and I needed to be sure I was done having kids. And then number 5, I needed to get these preventative surgeries before the age of 33, which was when my mom was first diagnosed with cancer, right? So on most days, all of this felt impossible. There was cycles of paralyzing fear and anxiety. And, months later, I graduated my fellowship, I got pregnant, I had a baby, and now I was a full-time working mom, pumping, sleep deprived, caring for dying people. It was just like getting cancer screenings. It was insane. And then I got pregnant again when my daughter was 9 months old, because I needed to get my kids done quick. And so it was a time of my life where I had literally no time. And I was drowning more than ever before. And that voice of my patient was always in the background. But again, I didn't know. I didn't know what it meant until one night. I was breastfeeding my baby, and I remember going to Google, which I don't recommend, but at this point I had no choice. Like, I had to go to Google. What can I do to reduce my risk of cancer? And somehow I came across Dr. Michael Greger and his book, How Not to Die. And what I read just in the first chapter blew me away. If you have not read this book, I highly recommend it. The first chapter, he talks about the story of his grandmother, who was 65, diagnosed with heart disease, and basically sent to hospice, which is something I was very familiar with. And she didn't accept that as her fate, went on to do some intensive lifestyle program and reversed her heart disease and lived another 30 years and died in her 90s. So not just as a doctor, but as a palliative care doctor, this to me was mind-blowing because I had just spent the last year taking care of so many people dying from these chronic illnesses. And never in my medical training, in my residency, did I learn anything about lifestyle medicine or the everyday things that we do, being able to not just reduce risk of our disease, but like actually treat and reverse disease. This was mind-blowing to me, right? And this was then also a turning point because for me, it was my genetic mutation that brought me here. So then I realized like this genetic mutation is actually a blessing for many reasons, but the biggest being it brought me lifestyle medicine, which then went on to change the trajectory of not just my personal life, but also now my professional life. And so this is all after everything I've done over the last 10 years, a lot of research, a lot of personal growth, a lot of certifications, and a lot of trainings in lifestyle medicine and coaching and all the medical things. What I actually learned was the only thing that I could actually control in any moment, especially the hard moments, was something called my state. And this whole slide could be a whole talk on its own, so I won't go through it in detail, but our state is really the way that we show up in the world, not just for ourselves, but for our families, our friends, our patients. It determines how we feel in any given moment. And there's three things for our state that matter. I'll skip number one for a minute. I'll go to our
So
focus.
Simran,
Mhm.
yeah. So I'm glad you're bringing this up because this is so important. As you said, this slide itself is so important and could be a session in itself. So let me remind our viewers. So Dr. Simran, she was here in our previous Gift of Health, the wellness chat as well. And please feel free to watch that session because every time I hear Dr. Simran's story, like it literally, I mean, I literally get tears because it's so touching. So please listen to the previous one because she shared her story and how she got into this. And today she is sharing more things on how you can do. In the previous session, you are able to see some tips and tools that she has given you that so that you can avoid breast cancer. And in this session, she is also like talking about the mindset because what is that you can take control of. So Simran, like if you have time, like I would really appreciate because this is very important. I know like we can discuss other things as well because this will be very useful to the audience in terms of what is that I can do because we can only do things that are in our control. So if you could just
So
briefly go
yeah,
over.
let me just go over briefly what this means, but we'll still talk about the
Sure.
things that you can do to reduce your risk of breast cancer. But I'm going to talk about this just for a second because one of the things that I have realized is, wellness is a mindset first, right? So if you can't control this, if you can't fix this, it's really going to be hard for you to take the everyday actions on the food you're eating, the way you're moving, and all of those things. And so it really comes down to this, right? So our focus and our beliefs is just that, everything that we focus on and what we believe. And it is our model of the world, right? It is our core beliefs. Like I believe that we don't experience life, we experience a life that we focus on. And a lot of this comes down to the questions that we're asking ourselves, right? Are we asking ourselves empowering questions or disempowering questions? So is life happening to me all the time? Am I a victim all the time? Or is this here to teach me something? What am I supposed to learn from this? What is this protecting me from? So it really depends on the questions that you're asking yourself, because you're going to get certain answers that will then lead you to do certain things, right? And then the language is really the words that we use to describe our experiences in life, and then the meaning that we associated with these situations, and then the stories that we create, and then again, going back to focus and beliefs, and then the actions that we're going to take, right? And I can tell you as a palliative care physician, but also someone that has been through a lot personally, that we will all experience not just the good and the beauty in life, but we will experience hardships in life. And this is not about toxic positivity and always thinking positive, positive, positive. It's about feeling the emotions, the difficult emotions, and processing them and being intentional about them and growing through them. But it's really about recognizing that the hardships in life are what allow us to appreciate so much more of the beauty that life gives us and to be present with it. And the hardships of life are really what help us become who we're meant to be in this life. And that has been such a powerful, understanding for me, not just learning from death and dying in my patients, but also just my own experience. And then this one is very powerful because this is something you do every single day. Your physiology, which is the biggest part of your state, is the way that you manage your body. It's everything you do with your body. And adjusting any single one of these can not just change how we feel, but what can change the risk of disease and what our quality of life and what our future will look like. Right? So the way we're eating, the way we're moving, the way we're sleeping, hopefully the substances we're not taking in, the way we're managing our stress, the people that are in our life, that is a big one. We don't think about it, but the people in our life is a huge one, right? So as a doctor, I didn't learn about the science behind lifestyle as medicine, behind mindset as medicine. I only learned about this when I became the patient. And here is what I've learned. If in palliative care, what I learned is that the biggest force of being human is our autonomy. It's our ability to control or have control over our life, especially the little things, like the everyday things, right? The ability to dress ourselves and move, and the ability to not be dependent on other people. And when you are diagnosed with cancer or heart disease or a genetic mutation, or when you become the patient, you are stripped of so much of your normalcy, your autonomy, your control, waiting for test results, waiting for biopsies, waiting for prescriptions, fighting with insurance. Like there is so much that is stripped from your control, that it is your lifestyle that gives you your control back. It is focusing on these small everyday things that will take you from feeling helpless to feeling hopeful about your situation, right? And what I was able to do at 26, breastfeeding, working full time, doing all the things, is very different than what I'm doing today, 10 years later at 36, right? So everyone's life, everyone's season looks different in terms of what is possible for you. And what I want you to take away from this is that it's not about perfection. It's only about progress. So we talked about this. I hope you take away that it is important to know if you have any red flags in your family for genetic mutations and hereditary risk, but only 5 to 10% of breast cancer cases are because of a hereditary mutation. Most cases are because of external factors like our lifestyle, our environmental factors. And then of course, genetics always play some role, but not to the extent that you would if you had a mutation. So now what can we control? So let's talk about this. So these are some of the things that, when it comes specific to breast cancer, our weight, alcohol consumption, physical activity, tobacco use, breastfeeding. And the model I really like to go to is the World Cancer Research Fund and the American Institute for Cancer Research, cancer risk reduction recommendations, because they are kind of the experts. They've looked at all of the research and they brought it down to these 10 tips. This is for cancer in general, but if we look at it specifically for breast cancer, right? Number one, be physically active. There is more than enough evidence to show that, physical activity reduces our risk of both pre and postmenopausal breast cancers. Do what you can do. If you can't do the recommended 150 minutes of moderate intensity of exercise, moderate intensity aerobic exercise a week, then don't do it. Start with the 10 minutes that you can do and build up from there, right? Everything has a stacking effect. Next, limit your consumption of alcohol. I know this is going to be a very unpopular opinion, but from everything that I have read, there is no safe amount of alcohol when it comes to breast cancer. The best thing to do is just not drink alcohol and find a much more fun way to enjoy socializing and have, a mocktail or, carbonated beverages with fruit, or, there's so many ways to be fun about it, but just limit your alcohol consumption as much as you can. This one is super, super important. Being a healthy weight. So excess body weight increases risk of postmenopausal breast cancer. But what I read recently it just kind of blew my mind. There was a study that showed for women who are diagnosed with breast cancer, the more markers of metabolic health, metabolic syndrome they have, meaning obesity, prediabetes, diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, the more of these markers they have, the worse their prognosis of breast cancer. And so this is all connected, especially in menopause. When our estrogen goes down, we are at higher risk of gaining weight around our midsection. We are at higher risk of metabolic syndrome, diabetes, high cholesterol, all of these conditions. And it is very much linked to not just breast cancer risk, but also prognosis after a diagnosis of breast cancer. And so what can we do to be a healthy weight, right? We can eat a diet that looks like the rainbow, right? We want to eat a diet that's super high in fiber. The average American takes about 10 to 15 grams of fiber a day, which is very, very low. So for at least, from the AICR recommendations, we want to go for at least 30 grams of fiber a day. And where do we get fiber? Fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, whole grains, beans, legumes, all of these foods have a lot of fiber in them. And then the other three arrows basically tell us what we should try to limit. So the scary fact is that 60 to 65% of the average American's calories are coming from processed and ultra processed foods. These are foods that are high in calories and have been stripped of all of their nutrition. And now that we even have reports showing that, processed and ultra processed foods and sugar sweetened beverages are linked to many different chronic diseases, including cancer, but also heart disease and so many of the other lifestyle related chronic illnesses that we're seeing today. And then the last one there is limit your consumption of red and processed meat. So the World Health Organization has basically stated that processed meat is a type 1 carcinogen, is a class 1 carcinogen, which is the same class as tobacco. So we know that it causes cancer, things like bacon, things like deli meats. So the more you can try to minimize it, the better. And then, of course, this one I'm a little sensitive to, right? Because I'm a genetic mutation carrier, I know a lot of women who actually chose to have a preventative mastectomy before they, were able to find a partner, before they were able to have children. And so I always like to say, breastfeed if it's available to you. If you can do it, because it can reduce your risk. But if it's not available, then it is what it is. So the best question I always get asked, in the last 10 years, what have you learned is the best exercise or the best food to reduce your risk of cancer? Like, what's your secret sauce? What do you do every day? And I'm like, it's the one that you're going to do. So do whatever exercise is available to you, the one you enjoy, eat whatever, food from the rainbow that you enjoy. Just make sure it's a whole food, nature's food, and you will be good to go. Just start there. And again, don't let perfection be the enemy of your progress, right? So as we wrap up talking about this, right, your risk assessment. So when it comes to family history, genetic mutations, you want to know, right? Take that screenshot that you took, bring it back to your family, and you want to know who had cancer, when did they have it, what kind of cancer, right? So the more people there are, the more, you want to think like, okay, is there a genetic mutation here, right? If you find out that there is a genetic mutation or you have one, right, you want to talk to a genetic counselor, you want to talk to, a high risk oncology team to tell you what your screening options are, what your preventative surgical options are, and figure out a good plan for you. I'm going to throw in a special mentioned for South Asian women, for African American women, for women of color, because they only represent a very small number of hereditary cancers. And I don't think it's because the number is small necessarily, but I think it's just because there's a lot of cultural and religious taboos, a lot of stigmas around disease and cancer and death. And so we just don't talk about it. And I think in general, women in these cultures tend to put themselves at the very bottom, and they put everyone else above them. And so I think body image expectations, incomplete family histories, because of immigration, I remember trying to put all the pieces of my family history together. It was very difficult because no one wanted to talk or share. But put yourself first, because if what I learned is that your self-care is your self-preservation. If you don't put yourself first, you will not be able to take care of anybody else you love, including your children and your family and everyone else. There's a lot of breast cancer risk assessment tools that you can talk to your doctor about. And then, of course, the lifestyle modification piece we talked about. There's so much you can do. So in 2020, I went on and I ended up having a preventative bilateral mastectomy with aesthetic flat closure, meaning I did not get reconstruction. Again, a story for another day about what that means, why I did that. Also decided to get a total hysterectomy, putting myself into surgical menopause at the age of 32. And now I'm on an estrogen patch to protect my heart, brain, and my bones, along with everything I'm doing with my lifestyle. It was a crazy year. 6 weeks later, I got board certified in lifestyle medicine. And then I went on to become a health and wellness coach, a culinary coach, and founded my platform, Wellness by LifestyleMD, all at the height of the COVID pandemic, while caring for more dying patients than I ever could have imagined in my whole career. But what I can tell you here at 36 years old, mom of two, palliative care physician for 10 years, married to a critical care physician, during the worst global pandemic of our time, is that I have never known a stronger, better version of myself ever. Like I can't imagine it. I mean, childbirth was very hard. It's a close second. But what did this version of me today learn over the last 10 years that the 26-year-old version of me did not yet know? And this is what I want you to take away from this whole talk. These last 3 slides are the most important. My husband had to move out for almost 10 weeks at the beginning of the pandemic because he was working in the ICU. We didn't know, our kids were very young. We didn't know what we were dealing with. And I got this book and I kept reading it over and over again to my 18-month-old and 3-year-old at the time. And what I actually didn't realize that the book was for me and not for them. And there was one line in there, and it says, when I got face to face with my problem, I discovered something. My problem was not what I thought it was. My problem, I discovered, held something beautiful inside. My problem held an opportunity for me to learn and to grow and to be brave and to do something. And so what I realized is that the most amazing things, the biggest opportunities, and the life-defining moments that happen to people are often disguised as impossible situations. And these situations help us write our story. And these stories that we tell ourselves are either going to pull us down and make us victims, or they're going to serve to empower ourselves and then go on to change the lives of so many people. But it all depends on the story that you're telling yourself. And so number 1, food is medicine, movement is medicine, sleep is medicine. Your lifestyle is the most powerful medicine that has and ever will exist. And Dr. Dean Ornish says, genes may load the gun, but lifestyle has the potential to pull the trigger. And our genetics, we can't control the genes our parents gave us, but we can control the switches that turn on and off the genes. And these are known as epigenetics. And they are influenced by our diet, by the way we move, by our sleep. And as someone who practiced palliative care for 10 years, I have seen a lot of suffering. And despite all the medical advances, I can tell you that it's these little things, these everyday habits that are the best and most powerful investment that you will make to not just reduce your risk of disease, but to protect your future quality of life and the quality of life of your loved ones, because when you get sick, it doesn't just affect you, it affects your whole inner circle. Number two, there is so much power in controlling what you can and making decisions followed by committed action. And like I told you, like I've always looked at my mutation as a blessing in disguise, simply because I had the option to be proactive with my decisions, to do everything that was in my control to reduce my risk of disease and do everything I can to be here for my kids for as long as I can. And I know for a fact that there are so many of my patients that have passed away that would have taken this chance in a heartbeat, because if they did, they might still be alive today, right? But knowledge is not enough. Knowledge is only potential power. It's knowledge plus action that gives you true power, right? And we saw during the pandemic that life can change in an instant. Life can change in an instant. But if you woke up today, if you have breath in your lungs, if you are moving your body today, if you woke up alive, it is not too late. I hear it all the time. I'm too old. It's too late. The best time to do anything is now, because today's the youngest you'll ever be, and you actually have a chance to do it. So just take action. Number three, have an abundance of gratitude over fear. It can be so hard when we're going through a hard time. We're diagnosed with cancer. We're going through a pandemic, to find what we're grateful for, but it's possible. Gratitude has been one of my biggest secret tools, and thank you to my patients, and honestly learning from death, because it is the little things in life, being able to breathe easy, being able to be with my family, or just waking up to live another day, is really what life is all about. And if you have those things, you have everything. And so throughout my entire career, my decades worth of life experiences that my patients have shared with me, their words always come down to this: I wish I loved more. I wish I spent more time with my family. I wish I pursued my passions, and I wish I just lived more when I had a chance. And so I just want to empower you to take this moment and the opportunity to love and to grow and just to be alive and take in everything that life gives you and offers you. And this is all I have for you today. So I hope I inspired you. I hope I just gave you a little piece of something to cultivate a lifestyle and a mindset to reach and make the most of this life. Like, it is such a gift, and it is honestly so short. So let's live it while we can. And I have this, Dr. Shoba, I hope it's okay. I put this book
Sure.
up there, How Healers Heal. I had the honor of, getting together with 32 other lifestyle medicine physicians, and our colleague, Dr. Shilpi, put this book together last year, and it is such a gift. So if you're interested, you can find it on Amazon. And of course,
And we
I'd
are
love to.
putting the links in the chat as well. So we are putting the link, so where like how you can reach Dr. Simran, and we are putting the link to How Healers Heal. So make sure you can grab this book. And this is a wonderful book. And just like Dr. Simran had shared her stories, you will find so many inspiring stories over there, like how through their lifestyle they have changed their lives. So it's really amazing. So and this was such an inspiring talk, Simran. As I say, every time I listen to you, it makes me emotional. But it's always such an honor to, I mean, like hear this again. So one thing for sure, I want to ask you, Simran, just to help our listener, like, you're such a busy doctor, you're a mom, you're a coach, you're an entrepreneur. So, how do you navigate and manage everything, like your food, your activities, stress? So, how do you even do that?
I think it's important to prioritize and figure out what is most important to me in this season of my life, right? So, when I found out about this mutation, I knew nothing about lifestyle, nothing. And so for me at that point, it was like, okay, what am I doing every single day that would make the biggest impact for me? And that was eating. So I didn't know how to cook. I was still the kid that was calling my mom and burning rice on the stove. So then, at that point, my husband and I were mostly eating at the hospital, mostly eating out. We didn't have kids yet. So then, I said, okay, I want to learn how to cook. And so then I ended up getting, the meal delivery kits and all of that. I slowly learned how to cook. But for a good, 4 years, just figuring out nutrition and learning how to change my eating habits, slowly became plant-based. I wasn't always plant-based. We ate a regular, diet, American diet, and then slowly became plant-based, slowly transitioned to make it sustainable. That is the biggest key, because January 1st comes around and we all make these radical lifestyle goals. And by February 1st, it all drops off, right? So the key is like pick one thing or a couple of things if you're in a season of life that's not as busy, and then slowly add it into your life and be consistent, right? Sustainability and consistency, those are the key tools to creating a lifestyle that is going to support your health and your quality of life. So don't try to be, a superhero. Just do what is available to you. And I know working moms, I mean, I've been one for 10 years. It's really hard, Dr. Shobha, as well. So there's no secret sauce. Just evaluate what you need right now. And if you do need help, that's okay. There's a lot of tools out there. You can get a coach. There's all sorts of ways. Accountability is really important. Get a support group, whatever. But just do what's available. Start one step at a time.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Simran. So as you said, making lifestyle change is hard. So don't hesitate to look for the support or get the support, because like both Simran and me, like as doctors, we also help people like how they can change their lifestyle. So like how they can improve their nutrition, how they can move more and stress less. So don't hesitate to get the coaching, because sometimes you think, oh, it's just a lifestyle change. I just need to change my eating habits. But it is hard. But once you know how to do that with a little coaching, like you actually do more. And when you are also getting the support, you actually are able to accomplish more.
And the other thing I'll just mention there is you really want to think about it as an investment, right?
Yeah.
So we go all out. Like right now, Diwali's coming up, and we're planning this big Diwali party, and we spend so much money on parties and clothes and bags and jewelries and these amazing vacations and all these things. But then when it comes to our health, we often say it's too expensive,
Yeah.
right? And so oftentimes we have our priorities mixed up, because what we don't realize is that if we don't have our health, we have nothing. Our health is a primary vehicle to all of our dreams, right? And so think of the good pair of shoes, the gym membership, the coach, the good whole foods. Think of that as an investment for everything else that you want to do in your life.
Excellent. That is so well said. So, Dr. Simran, Connie is asking, at what age should you stop doing a mammogram?
So that's a really good question. And I think that really comes down to informed consent, right? So you need to have a sit down with your doctor and do some good old shared medical decision making. Take into account your age, take into account your risk factors, take into account, what is treatment going to buy me or cost me? What is screening going to buy me or cost me? What are we going to do with the results? If, say you're 90 years old and you kind of know, like, I don't really want to have chemotherapy. Well, then maybe it makes more sense, not to do screening, and because you're not going to pursue aggressive treatment. But that is such a personalized, approach. So it really requires sitting down with your medical team and having a conversation. And the best thing you can do for yourself is ask questions. So, what is this? What would this mean? What would my options be? What is the benefits, the risk, the alternatives, all of those good questions, so that you can make the best decision for yourself.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Simran. So the other question we have here is, like initially you were talking about the mindset. So focusing on the right question. So Grace is asking, can you just expand on that? Like, what do you mean by asking the right question?
So, there's different questions that we ask ourselves, which we can call empowering questions and disempowering questions, right? Empowering questions are questions that will allow us to come up with an answer that will take us forward in the direction that we want to go, right? Because they are going to increase our sense of agency. They're going to increase our confidence. They're going to increase just our ability to, be positive and know that just because I'm in a difficult situation doesn't mean that life is going to end, right? So just because something bad is happening doesn't mean that you can't find something good, right? And all of that is going to come down to the questions you're asking yourself, right? So when I found out about this genetic mutation, that's a perfect example. I could have sat there and said, oh my God, I'm doomed. There's been 10 people in my family who've been diagnosed with breast cancer. My mom was diagnosed at 33. Why am I even going to get married? Why would my husband even want to be with me? I have a mutation. I'm pretty much like, this is my destiny. Cancer is my destiny. Who's going to want to be with me? What am I going to do? So you see, like, you can lead yourself down this spiral with asking yourself disempowering questions and end up going down a black hole versus saying, okay, I have a genetic mutation. What can I do to reduce my risk of cancer? What is in my control? And then that will take you one step forward, right? Because it'll give you an actionable step. Like for me, I found resources and I learned about lifestyle medicine. And then I started applying those tools into my life. And that went on to open a whole new world for me because it went from what can I do to reduce my risk of cancer to how can I use my pain and turn it into my purpose to help empower other women to reduce their risk of cancer and to improve their quality of life. Like a simple question can change the trajectory of your life. That's how powerful questions are. Is life happening to me? Or is life happening for me? Two different questions, completely different life.
That is so powerful. Thank you so much for explaining that. So a lot of time what happen is with, I know I want to prevent breast cancer, or once I'm diagnosed, maybe let me see. But it's so important, right? Because once, like, even when we are healthy, we don't think in terms of we need to change our lifestyle or we need to eat better. And like some of the beautiful examples that you gave, because like when it comes to processed meats, so even though we know that it is number one carcinogen, so we don't pay much attention when we are eating them in our daily routine. So what are some of the things, so for a person who is transitioning to plant-based or even contemplating on what can I do to prevent my risk of breast cancer, so where they can start in terms of eating, like what especially when it comes to what they can do to incorporate healthy eating lifestyle.
So outside of the things that we kind of talked about, when we hone in on like the specific foods that you can eat that, there is some research to suggest that it can reduce our risk of breast cancer and breast cancer recurrence. Number one, so these are probably my top 3 or 4. Number one is whole soy foods. Now, again, this could be a topic all in of itself. There's so many myths around soy, but we have hundreds of studies in humans now showing that whole food soy sources like tofu, tempeh, miso, unsweetened soy milk, these are great foods to incorporate to reduce your risk of primary prevention, to reduce your risk of breast cancer as well as breast cancer recurrence. if you bring this to your doctor, again, most doctors are not trained, most conventionally trained doctors are not trained in nutrition and in lifestyle medicine. And so what I would do is do a little bit of your own research, reach out to doctors like us who can provide you with research that you can then take to your doctors. One thing that doctors love is research. So if you bring them the science, you're going to teach them something. And guess what? You just taught them something that then they will share with hundreds of other people. And you just had a part in improving the lives of hundreds of other people. And that is what happens when you share, right? So soy is number one. The other thing I would say there is like avoid processed soy, right? So there's so, as much as I love the fact that like, veganism is a trend now and plant-based is a hot word in the food market, just be careful with the ultra processed foods, right? There's a lot of like soy protein isolates and all of that stuff you find in like vegan nuggets and vegan burgers and like all of those processed vegan foods. So those are not good for our health. Just because something is labeled vegan or plant-based doesn't mean it's good. So you really want to make sure you know what you're consuming. Number two is, let's see, cruciferous vegetables. So things like broccoli sprouts, cauliflower, bok choy. These are a class of foods that specifically have some active compound in there known as sulforaphane. And sulforaphane has been shown to have very strong, anti-cancer properties, specifically for breast cancer. The other thing I eat every day is a big bowl of mixed berries. Berries are super, super high in fiber and great for breast cancer risk reduction. I eat a lot of mushrooms. Mushrooms have also, there's some science to support that they reduce risk of breast cancer. And then I drink not this big, but I drink like a 24-ounce bottle of green tea every day, because green tea has something in there called EGCG, which is a very powerful antioxidant that has been shown to reduce risk of breast cancer. So those are some of the things that you can do. Starting tomorrow, you can just start incorporating more of those things and feel good that you're doing something to reduce your risk of breast cancer. And here's the other kicker. Not only will all those things, if you start eating those foods on a daily basis, not only will they reduce your risk of breast cancer, but they're also going to reduce your risk of metabolic syndrome. So things like high cholesterol and high blood pressure and pre-diabetes and diabetes. And then all of these silent killers down the road lead to things like heart disease and kidney disease and stroke. So you're reducing your risk of all of that by incorporating these foods.
That's amazing. Thank you for those tips. So basically, like if we can have soy products, if we can have cruciferous vegetables, add mushrooms, green tea. So these are all the things that are doable and which we can incorporate on a daily basis. Excellent. And so we have one more. Did I miss this question? Okay. Okay. So Simran, are there any other myths that you would like to bust? Because when it comes to breast cancer, a lot of people have myths around it. So what is the common one that you hear?
So we talked about the family history, the genetic mutation one, right? So we talked about alcohol, right? And you see this a lot. People are diagnosed with breast cancer, but their oncologists will tell them that they can continue to drink. But I think we have the research is pretty strong, showing us that breast cancer is clearly linked to every single alcoholic beverage you drink will increase your risk of breast cancer. So even in moderation, I just don't think
I would say avoid. I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I would, yeah, there's so many, like if you really want a fun drink, there are so many, even just playing with like some of the non-alcoholic, there's a whole sober curious movement happening with Gen X. And I love it because there's so many companies that have come out with zero proof spirits, non-alcoholic beers, be careful with kombucha because they usually put a lot of sugar in it. But if you can find a low sugar kombucha, like those are fun to drink. There's a lot of adaptogen teas now. Like there's just so many fun drinks out there that like, why drink alcohol when it increases your risk of so many medical problems, right? Including breast cancer. So that's definitely one. The soy myth we talked about. This is a big one. I'm too young to get breast cancer.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not, especially in today's day and age. The rates of breast cancer in young women are skyrocketing. There was just, I don't know the exact quote, but there was a recent report from the American Cancer Society that was just released on this. So please don't believe that. You know, my mom actually was told that at 33 that you're too young to have breast cancer, and she actually ended up getting diagnosed in India because her family took her to get biopsied there. So if your doctor said, if you feel something and your doctor says you're too young, please get a second opinion, because especially today, the rates of breast cancer in young women are skyrocketing. So advocate, empower yourselves, and for your life. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Simran, for this enlightening session. I mean, our viewers loved it. And it's like, it's always a joy to have you here and speak with you. So thank you so much for carving your time. I know it was such a busy day for you, but still you made some time for us. So I really appreciate it. And I'll let you go back to your family. So
Thank
thank you
you.
so much.
Thanks for having me. It was a
Oh,
pleasure.
thank you.
All right.